Hey guys, it's Kevin and the Murder for you guys. I'm reviewing this a movie that I really did not know how it was going to turn out. It's the first movie in February, and it is a horror film, and that definitely did have me a little bit concerned. Didn't really hear a lot about it, and I figured I'd check it out, and that is none other than Winchester. And what Winchester is essentially about is we do not center on Sarah Winchester, contrary to popular belief. We actually center on the character of Eric Price. He is essentially this medium who basically ends up tracking down Sarah Winchester because he's heard of everything she's been doing in her mansion, building her mansion basically to lure ghosts in and whatnot, and he basically goes to examine her, see if there actually is something going on with her, if she actually is being haunted by ghosts, and if she really is fit to run the mansion, and that's really all I'm going to say. So Winchester in general, like I said, I really did not have many expectations for this movie. The teaser I loved. I thought it was really creepy. I thought it was really eerie. It just really looked like something great. It looked like they really were going for that Victorian feel. And anything in Victorian times and it's a horror movie, I'm totally down for. I thought that's definitely what this was going to be. But then the other trailers happened and they just were very generic and they didn't really hook me in the way that that first teaser did. So, like I said, going in this, I really did not know how it was going to be. I knew it had some really great actors. I at least thought we were going to get some really good performances out of these actors. I didn't really know a ton about Winchester Mansion in general. And I have to say, not only did this movie, basically end up being exactly what I thought it was going to be, which is just a generic horror film, but it's one of the most ill-conceived, baffling, and just completely wrong efforts I've seen in any horror film in a long time. I'm going to get into that right now, starting off with the cast. And look, there are a lot of problems with this movie, and I'm talking a lot of stuff, but the acting really isn't one of them. I do think the actors here overall did a really great job, and easily the highlight of this film is Helen Mirren as Sarah Winchester. Now, while she does take a while to come into the movie, she really is pretty great here. I really did love her performance. Not love, but I really did like her performance in this movie as Sarah Winchester overall. This is someone who, you can tell that she has a certain agenda. She's kind of been followed by these ghosts for a while, and I did think she did a really good job there. You definitely do root for her throughout the film, even though she's not the main character. We'll get to that in a little bit, but I did really like where they went with her. I thought overall she was definitely really great here, and for me, really did steal the show from pretty much everyone. And then Jason Clarke in this movie as Eric Price. We'll get to the character a little bit later, but he plays his part pretty well, I'd say. There's not really a lot for him to do in this movie, but like I said, he does play his part pretty well. Him and Helen Mirren, I guess, have decent chemistry. They, for the most part, do work well together, but there's really not much to say about him overall. The rest of the cast here, I wouldn't say is bad necessarily. Well, one of them actually is truly awful, but the rest of the cast here is just kind of whatever. Sarah Snook is the definition of just going through the motions, and this really disappointed me because I loved her work in Predestination, and I saw her in the movie, and I'm like, she's going to be the next big thing. Flash forward to 3 years later, actually, and I still have yet to see anything from her. This is the first thing I've seen from her since then. I don't know if she's done anything else, but this is the first thing I've seen from her since Predestination, and it's very disappointing. I thought she could have done a lot better work here. She's very underused in this movie, and, she really doesn't have much of anything to do. All the other actors, like I said, they just kind of play their parts well. Angus Sampson does not have anything to do in this movie. Don't go in this movie thinking he's going to have a big part because he really doesn't. He's just kind of on the cast list. Easily the worst actor in this movie, though. Whoever played the little boy in this movie, I can't even remember his name. That's how forgettable his role is. Whoever played that character is awful. I've seen some good child actors in the past few months. This is not one of them. This kid cannot act for his life. He's very lifeless. He's boring, and he's just very wooden. I do not see any future for him whatsoever. The acting from him was truly atrocious, and yeah, so like I said, that's really all I have to say when it comes to the cast. Now let's get to the thing that I really want to talk about, which right off the bat, the directing here from the Spierig brothers. Oh my god, the directing in this movie. Look, again, similar to Sarah Snook, I saw Predestination. I'm like, you know what? These directors are really talented. I see a real future in them. I really thought they had a career in these sort of, original, kind of different sci-fi films. That's what I really thought they were going to do, but then they did something like Jigsaw, which, looking back, I wasn't really the hugest fan of. I'd probably give that movie like a C or a C minus. It wasn't a terrible movie, but it was just very generic. There really wasn't anything that remarkable about it. So again, I just thought, okay, this one really didn't work out that well, and that's really all there is to it. That it just didn't really work out for them. And I thought with this movie, they really would redeem themselves, and no, it could not have gone worse. If anything, I think this was even lower effort than Jigsaw. I mean, before this movie, they had a whole sort of, like a thank you thing where they thanked you for coming to the movie, and that felt much more genuine than most of the directing throughout this movie, because the directing in this movie, it just felt so lazy. It felt like they didn't know what they wanted this movie to be. Do they want this to be a biopic about Sarah Winchester and kind of what she went through? Do they want this to be a horror movie? Do they want this to be a psychological thriller? It has no idea what it wants to be. The horror elements, may I add, are some of the most forced in things I've seen in a very long time. We'll get to that when it comes to the writing, but their directing, it's all over the place. It's extremely sloppy. Again, it has no idea what it wants to be, and I think that definitely is one of the biggest problems of this movie. But that's nothing compared to the writing. I mean, again, there are tons of problems with this movie, but I think it all boils down to one problem, and that is this. You know how on all the posters you see Helen Mirren in her, Sarah Winchester costume, and you see her, starring Helen Mirren, all the trailers starring Helen Mirren, and you didn't really see a lot of Jason Clarke? Yeah, forget that, because she's actually not the main character in this movie. No, Sarah Winchester is a supporting role in this movie. Jason Clarke, for some reason, is the main character here, and it is one of the most bizarre marketing tactics I have seen in a very long time. I mean, at no point on any of the posters do they show Jason Clarke. Sure, Jason Clarke is included in the poster, and you do see his name on it, but you don't see his face. We didn't really see much from him in the trailer, so the film leads you to believe that this film is about, Helen Mirren and Sarah Winchester and her whole obsession with these ghosts. In fact, the plot line in general, the way the plot is described, it makes you think Sarah Winchester is the main character, when that's not the case. The main character actually is Eric Price, and honestly, I don't really blame the marketing team for doing this, because Eric Price, the character, is one of the most one-note, bland main characters I've seen in quite a while. I mean, aside from a couple things with him, there's nothing with this guy. This guy, he clearly has some sort of trauma that he's going through, which I don't have a problem with that. I mean, you see that in pretty much every horror movie. He's kind of grappling with the death or something going on with his wife. We don't really know, but the film keeps it way too vague. They keep it hidden until I'd say the third act of this movie. So the whole movie, we have this character that we're following, and we don't really know why. There's really nothing to like about this guy. He's not very likable. He's got this addiction throughout the film. The first scene is him waking up to all these prostitutes, essentially. It's just awful. I could not stand his character in this movie, and there are points in this movie where you can tell we're not supposed to be on his side. We're supposed to be on Sarah Winchester's side, and I don't know who got their wires crossed where, but it really seemed like someone tampered with this writing, because again, from the marketing and the way the trailer's done, and even the plot line, it really seems like this movie was supposed to be about Sarah Winchester, but something happened, and instead it was about Jason Clarke, and it does not feel like it was the original intent. I don't know if that's the case, but it really does not seem like it was the original intent, because just the way the story is done, it definitely does not seem like that's the case here. You know, the whole thing with his character, like I said, he's just boring, he's generic, there's nothing to him, and then the film tries to throw in all this horror stuff, and the horror stuff really doesn't work here. Every possible horror cliche you could think of is in this movie. You know, someone looks through a door and they see some mysterious figure, or, you know, someone hears a noise and, oh, it's just the housekeeper, or, oh, it's just, you know, Sarah Winchester's daughter. You know, there's not much else going on there. It's so lazy. There's no original thought put in this movie, and it just feels so derivative. You've seen every scare in this movie I saw coming. There's not a single one that scared me. No one in my theater was scared. I will tell you that right now. I saw this movie with quite a few people. Not a single person was scared. People even walked out of this movie because it's just that boring. This movie is extremely boring. The scares really don't work, and the mystery surrounding everything that's going on is not interesting at all. I was very bored when it came to the mythology in this movie as well. It's not interesting. Again, you've seen it a million times, and they don't try to do anything different with it, and it's very unfortunate, because I think they could have really done something different with this. They could have maybe added some sort of layered to this story, but again, they just really didn't, and it did not work at all. The mythology in general, the whole ghost story, it's not interesting. I really was not into it at all. The cinematography here isn't even that great. The cinematography looks like something off, like, say, sci-fi movie of the week. It really does, especially some of the possession scenes. What ends up going down in this movie, because you guys know, someone's going to end up possessed. That's how it works in, like, virtually all these movies. Those scenes are so horribly filmed, and it looks like something out of a movie from, like, 1992. It does not look like a movie from 2018, and it's laughably bad. Like, those scenes really took me out of the movie, and they really did not work at all. So that really didn't work. The score as well is very bland. There's really nothing to it at all. The editing in this movie also is awful. I really was not a fan of the editing in this film. It's very choppy. It's way too slow, and it takes so long for anything of interest to happen. Sarah Winchester isn't introduced till, like, the first 30 minutes of this movie, and they spend all this time building her up, and again, she really does not have that much to do here. Most of the movie is just her and Jason Clarke having these conversations about his past and things like that, or it's her summoning these ghosts and having some sort of connection. Again, it's just not explained very well at all. There are so many things the movie tries to leave unexplained, and it just doesn't work, and it's similar to The Open House, but The Open House did not piss me off to the degree that this did. The Open House was just very frustrating. This movie I did not really see any potential in from the first shot, for the most part, but then the climax happens, and the climax of this movie, without spoiling anything, is one of the most baffling climaxes I've seen in quite a while. I mean, there's this one specific direction it takes. Like I said, Jason Clarke's character, they don't really reveal anything going on with him until I'd say the last 20 or so minutes of this movie, and then something happens, and you think they're going in this one direction, and then they just completely forget about it. Like, it's not discussed again, it doesn't happen, and it legitimately pissed me off, and it left me so confused. I don't know if anyone else felt this way, but after that happened, I was like, wait, what's going on here? I was so lost with what actually was going on after that scene. It really confused me. I had no idea where they were going after that, and the film ends in such an anticlimactic way that I just didn't care. I really did not care. Guys, Winchester is awful. It is every generic horror film you could possibly get. I don't know how this was released in February, to be honest with you, because this really did feel like a January movie. In fact, if you were to replace the first release of January and the first release of February, I think it would make a lot more sense, because Winchester feels like a January movie. It feels like the first movie of January in pretty much every way. It's got that derivative, not giving a shit feel to it that most of them do, and Insidious actually did try to do something creative and different. Granted, it wasn't wasn't all that interesting, but it was definitely a hell of a lot better than what this ended up being. What we end up getting here, like I said, is just one of the most derivative, unoriginal things I've seen in quite a while. It is as bad as a horror film as you could possibly get. It has every possible horror scare in the book. Nothing is scary about it. It's not interesting. It's got a couple good performances in there, but other than that, there's really not much to recommend about this movie, and I'm definitely going to give Winchester overall a D. Like I said, guys, I did have some anticipation for this, but this really let me down in basically every way possible. But overall, guys, it's it from our review / rant of Winchester. Let me know what you guys thought of this movie overall. Love your thoughts. And if you haven't seen this movie, I honestly would not recommend it. It is definitely not worth your time whatsoever. Like I said, people even walked out of my theater during this movie. I've never seen that happen, to be honest with you. I rarely go to a theater and people actually walk out before the movie's over, but that happened with this movie. That's how bad this really was. But that's in my review. Hope you enjoyed. See you guys in my next video, and I will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.